Captain David Rodriguez never thought his biggest problem would be getting married. As one of Earth's top military officers, he had faced down enemy fleets, negotiated peace treaties, and survived 3 major space battles. But sitting in the emergency council chamber of the Galactic Court, he realized all those experiences had prepared him for exactly nothing. The alien sitting across from him looked like a cross between a giant mantis and a graceful dancer. Her name was Judge Corvash, and she had been explaining the situation for the past hour in her calm, measured voice. David still couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Let me get this straight," David said, rubbing his temples. 3 months ago, our ambassador accidentally insulted an alien princess by refusing some kind of ceremony. Now they want to go to war with all of humanity, and your solution is for me to marry not one, but to alien princesses I've never met, Judge Corvash's. Her eyes blinked in sequence. That is a simplified but accurate summary, Captain Rodriguez. The Zephyrian Empire considers the slight against their royal family to be grounds for what they call honor war. Such conflicts traditionally continue until one side is completely destroyed. David leaned back in his chair, staring at the holographic display showing the current positions of military fleets. The Zephyrian ships looked like enormous butterflies made of metal and crystal. Beautiful but deadly. According to the tactical report, each one could level the city in minutes. "How many ships are we talking about?" David asked. "Their forward fleet consists of 300 vessels." Judge Corvash replied, "Our intelligence suggests they have another 1,000 ships ready to launch from their home systems if needed." David felt his stomach drop. Humanity had maybe 100 ships total, and most of those were exploration vessels with light weapons. In a straight fight, Earth wouldn't last a week. "What exactly happened during this ceremony?" David asked. "I need to understand what we're dealing with." Judge Corvash touched a control pad, and a recording began playing in the air above them. David watched as Ambassador Lisa Chang stood in what looked like a magnificent garden filled with crystalline trees. Two tall, graceful figures approached her. They had blue-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer in the light, and their movements were fluid like water. "These are Princess Zara and Princess Lixa," Judge Corvash explained. "They are the granddaughters of Supreme Matriarch Velter, the ruler of the Zephyrian Empire." In the recording, the 2 princesses began what looked like an elaborate dance around Ambassador Chang. They moved in perfect synchronization, their voices creating a haunting melody that sent chills down David's spine. The ceremony was beautiful, but David could see the confusion on the ambassador's face. Ambassador Chang had no idea what was happening. Judge Corvash continued. When the princesses finished their ritual, they waited for her response. In Zephyrian culture, silence during a bonding ceremony is considered acceptance. When she simply thanked them and walked away, they interpreted this as the deepest possible insult. David watched as the princesses' expressions changed from hope to shock to something that might have been heartbreak. He began to understand why this had escalated so quickly. "So they think our ambassador agreed to marry them and then rejected them publicly?" "Precisely. In their culture, such behavior would be grounds for exile or even execution. The fact that a representative of humanity did this to members of the royal family has created a crisis that threatens both our species." David studied the tactical displays again. The Zephyrian fleet was holding position just outside human space, but long-range sensors showed they were fully armed and ready for battle. Earth's defenses, such as they were, wouldn't be able to stop them if they decided to attack. "Why me?" David asked finally. "There have to be other officers, other diplomats. Who could handle this?" Judge Corvash's expression was difficult to read, but David thought he detected something like sympathy in her alien features. "The Zephyrian matriarch has specific requirements. The human representative must be unmarried, must hold significant military rank, and must be willing to undergo their bonding ceremony completely. You are the highest-ranking unmarried officer in the human fleet who also has diplomatic credentials." David laughed, but there was no humor in it. Diplomatic credentials? One negotiated one peace treaty, and that was because both sides were too exhausted to keep fighting. Nevertheless, you have the qualifications they require. More importantly, Captain Rodriguez, you have something else they value highly. What's that? Honor. Your service record shows a pattern of personal sacrifice for the greater good. You've put yourself at risk to protect civilian populations. You've refused promotions that would take you away from active duty. And you've never broken your word once given. The Zephyrians respect such qualities above all else. David felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Outside the windows of the space station, he could see the distant glow of Earth's sun. Somewhere in that direction, 5 billion people were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their continued existence might depend on one man's willingness to marry to alien princesses. What happens if I say no? David asked, though he already knew the answer. The Zephyrian fleet will receive authorization to proceed with their honor war. Conservative estimates suggest they could destroy Earth's orbital defenses within 6 hours and render the planet uninhabitable within 3 days. David closed his eyes and tried to imagine explaining to his parents, his sister, his friends that he could have prevented a war, but chose not to because he didn't want to get married. The absurdity of the situation would have been funny. If billions of lives weren't hanging in the balance, tell me about these princesses. David said finally, if I'm going to do this, I need to know what I'm getting into. Judge Corvish activated another display, showing detailed profiles of both women. Princess Zara appeared first, tall and athletic with the bearing of a natural warrior. Her golden eyes seemed to burn with intensity even in the still image. Princess Zara is the elder of the two. She commands a battalion in the Zephyrian military and is considered one of their finest. Tactical minds, she values strength, directness, and personal courage above all else by human standards. She would be considered quite formidable in combat. The image shifted to show Princess Lixa, slightly smaller than her sister, but no less striking. Her silver-tinted skin seemed to glow softly, and her dark eyes held depths that suggested considerable intelligence. Princess Lixa is a scientist and strategist. She has advanced degrees in quantum physics, xenobiology, and diplomatic theory. She is more reserved than her sister, but equally respected in Zephyrian society. David studied both images carefully. These weren't the monsters he had been half expecting. They looked like people, alien people certainly, but individuals with their own thoughts and feelings and dreams. The thought of marrying them sight unseen terrified him, but the alternative was unthinkable. How long do I have to decide? The matriarch has given us 72 Earth hours. After that, she will consider our silence to be a final rejection, and the fleet will proceed with their attack. David looked at his watch. Already 6 hours had passed since the ultimatum was delivered. In 66 hours, if he didn't agree to this impossible marriage, Earth would be at war with an enemy they couldn't possibly defeat. He thought about his oath as an officer, his duty to protect humanity, and the oath he had taken to defend Earth and all its people. He had never imagined that oath would lead him to an altar with 2 alien brides. But life had a way of surprising you when you least expected it. I need to meet them first. David said finally, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to marry them and somehow make this work, I need to actually talk to them face to face. Judge Corvish nodded approvingly. That can be arranged. The matriarch has agreed to allow a meeting on neutral ground before any ceremony takes place. David stood up slowly, feeling as if the artificial gravity had suddenly doubled. In less than 3 days, he would either be married to 2 alien princesses or watching Earth burn. Neither option seemed real, but the responsibility was undeniably his dot as he walked toward the door. Judge Corvish called after him, Captain Rodriguez, for what it is worth, I believe you are making the right choice. Few beings would willingly sacrifice their personal freedom for the sake of their entire species. David paused at the threshold, thinking about the weight of 5 billion lives resting on his shoulders. Judge, I just hope I don't end up getting everyone killed trying to save them. The neutral transport ship felt more like a luxury cruise liner than a diplomatic vessel. David had expected something sterile and military, but the corridors were filled with soft lighting and what looked like living walls covered in gentle, glowing plants. Even the air smelled pleasant, like rain on fresh earth. Nervous? asked Dr. Helen Park, the xenobiologist who had volunteered to accompany him on this impossible mission. She was one of the few humans who had actually studied Zephyrian culture, though most of her knowledge came from intercepted transmissions and second-hand reports. Terrified would be more accurate, David admitted, adjusting his dress uniform for the 100th time. I'm about to meet the alien princesses who I might have to marry to prevent a war. How exactly does someone prepare for that? Dr. Park smiled sympathetically. Just be yourself. From what I've learned about their culture, they value honesty above almost everything else. They can apparently sense emotional deception through some kind of empathic ability. That made David feel even worse. He had spent years learning to hide his emotions during diplomatic negotiations. But apparently that skill would be useless here. The thought of having his feelings read like an open book by to complete strangers was almost as scary as the prospect of marriage itself. The ship's communication system chimed softly. Captain Rodriguez, we are approaching the Zephyrian vessel. Please prepare for transfer. David took a deep breath and followed Dr. Park to the docking bay. Through the transparent walls, he could see the Zephyrian ship growing larger as they approached up close. It was even more beautiful than the tactical displays had suggested. The hull seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that shifted colors like oil on water. The docking process was surprisingly smooth. One moment they were on the human transport, and the next they were walking through an airlock into what felt like stepping inside a giant flower. The walls curved gracefully upward, and everything seemed to glow with its own inner light. Welcome aboard the Starweaver, said a voice behind them. David turned to see a tall Zephyrian in what looked like ceremonial robes. I am Commander Thane. The princesses are waiting for you in the Garden of First Meetings. As they walked through the ship, David couldn't help but stare. Everything was organic curves and flowing lines, as if the entire vessel had been grown rather than built. Crew members moved with the same fluid grace he had seen in the recording of the ceremony, and their skin seemed to shimmer with different colors depending on their mood. Their technology is incredible, Dr. Park whispered. These ships are actually living organisms, bred and trained over centuries to serve as vessels. The crew doesn't pilot them so much as communicate with them. The Garden of First Meetings took David's breath away. It was a vast circular chamber filled with plants and flowers unlike anything on Earth. Some of the trees seemed to be made of crystal, while others had leaves that played musical notes when the breeze touched them. In the center of the garden, near a fountain that flowed upward instead of down, two figures waited. Princess Zara was exactly as impressive in person as she had been in the recordings. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the posture of someone who had never backed down from a challenge. Her golden eyes tracked David's every movement as he approaches, and he felt like a specimen being examined under a microscope. Princess Lixa was smaller, but no less striking. Her silver-tinted skin caught the light from the crystal trees, and her dark eyes seemed to hold depths of intelligence that made David feel like she could see straight through to his soul. She wore robes that seemed to shift and flow like liquid, and her movements were precise and graceful. Captain Rodriguez, Princess Zara said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to command. We have heard much about you. Your reputation as a warrior precedes you. David felt heat rise to his cheeks. Your Highness, I'm honored to meet you, though I should point out that I'm more of a diplomat than a warrior these days. Something flickered in Zara's golden eyes that might have been disappointment. Our intelligence reports suggest otherwise. Did you not single-handedly disable 3 enemy ships during the Centauri conflict? That was mostly luck and desperation, David replied honestly. I was trying to protect a civilian evacuation ship. Anyone would have done the same thing, Princess. Lixa stepped forward, her head tilted slightly as if she were listening to something David couldn't hear. Interesting. Your emotional resonance suggests you truly believe that, despite evidence to the contrary. Most beings would exaggerate their accomplishments when meeting potential mates. The word mates made David's stomach do flip-flops, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. I've never been good at bragging. Besides, if we're going to do this thing, shouldn't we start with honesty? Both princesses exchanged a look that seemed to carry entire conversations. David was reminded that they were sisters who had probably been together their entire lives, with bonds he couldn't even imagine. "You speak of this thing as if it were an unpleasant duty," Zara observed, her voice carrying a slight edge. "Do you find the prospect of bonding with us so distasteful?" David realized he had already put his foot in his mouth. "No, that's not what I meant at all. It's just that this whole situation is overwhelming. 3 days ago, I had never even seen a Zephyrian. Now I'm supposed to marry 2 of them to prevent a war. I'm trying to be honest about how confusing this all is." Princess Lixa moved closer, and David caught a scent like jasmine and starlight. "Confusion is understandable. We are experiencing similar emotions. This arrangement was not of our choosing, either, but you're willing to go through with it? Our people's honor demands it." Zara replied stiffly. "The insult to our family cannot stand unanswered. And what do you want?" David asked quietly. "Not your people, not your grandmother, not galactic politics. What do you 2 actually want?" The question seemed to catch both princesses off guard. They looked at each other again, and David saw something vulnerable pass between them. "No one has asked us that," Lixa said finally. "In our culture, personal desires are considered secondary to family duty and social harmony. Well, I'm asking. Now, if you could choose freely, what would you choose?" Zara's stern expression softened slightly. "I would choose to know you better before making such a permanent decision. In our culture, bonding is not just marriage as humans understand it. It creates psychic connections that can last for centuries. And I would choose to understand your species better," Lixa added. "Your capacity for individual growth and adaptation fascinates me. Most species become set in their patterns, but humans seem to constantly evolve." David felt some of his tension ease. These weren't the demanding alien princesses he had been imagining. They were people with their own fears and uncertainties, thrown into this situation just as unwillingly as he was. "What if we made a deal?" David suggested. "Before any ceremonies or bonding or whatever, we spend time actually getting to know each other. If we're going to save both our species, shouldn't we at least try to understand what we're getting into?" "The matriarch will not wait indefinitely," Zara warned. "We have perhaps 2 days before she expects a final answer. Then we use those 2 days," David replied. "We talk, we learn about each other, and we figure out if there's any way to make this work for all of us." Princess Lixa smiled for the first time since David had arrived, and the expression transformed her entire face. "I would like that very much," Zara nodded slowly. "Very well, but I warn you, Captain Rodriguez, I will not bond with someone who cannot prove their worth. If you wish to know us, you must also allow us to know you completely." David felt a mixture of excitement and terror at the prospect. In 48 hours, he would either be married to these 2 remarkable women or watching his home world burn. But for the first time since this whole crisis began, he felt like there might actually be a chance for something good to come out of it. "Deal," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Both princesses looked at his outstretched hand curiously. "It's how humans seal agreements," Dr. Park explained helpfully. Princess Lixa reached out and grasped David's hand gently. Her skin was surprisingly warm, and he felt a tiny electric thrill at the contact. Princess Zara followed suit, her grip firm and strong. "Let us begin then," Zara said. "We have much to learn about each other in very little time." The wedding ceremony was supposed to be simple, at least. That's what David had been told during the frantic preparations aboard the neutral space station. Simple turned out to be a relative term when dealing with Zephyrian traditions. The ceremonial chamber was unlike anything David had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living light that pulsed gently in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the floating observation platforms, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes against the glowing backdrop. "Just remember," Dr. Park whispered as she adjusted David's ceremonial robes, "the bonding ritual involves some kind of psychic connection." The Zephyrians weren't entirely clear about what that means, but they assured us it won't hurt. David nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. The past 2 days had been a whirlwind of cultural exchange and getting to know his future wives. He had learned that Zara collected ancient poetry and wrote her own verses in her spare time. Lixa, despite her serious demeanor, had a wicked sense of humor and could make him laugh until his sides hurt with her observations about human behavior. More importantly, they had all begun to genuinely care about each other. What started as a political arrangement had slowly transformed into something that felt real and meaningful. David was still terrified about the psychic bonding part, but he no longer felt like he was sacrificing himself for his species. He felt like he was choosing a future he actually wanted. "The princesses are ready," announced Elder Thynel, the Zephyrian priest who would conduct the ceremony. The ancient alien moved with deliberate grace, her crystalline robes chiming softly with each step. Princess Zara entered first, and David's breath caught in his throat. Her ceremonial dress seemed to be made of captured starlight, flowing around her tall frame like liquid silver. Her golden eyes found his across the chamber, and she smiled with genuine warmth. Princess Lixa followed, equally stunning in robes that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Her usual reserved expression had been replaced by something David had never seen before: pure joy. The sight of her happiness made his chest tight with emotion. "Friends and witnesses," Elder Thynel began, her voice somehow carrying to every corner of the vast chamber without amplification. "We gather today to witness a bonding that will unite not just 3 hearts, but 3 worlds in harmony." The ceremony began with traditional vows, spoken first in the melodic Zephyrian language and then translated into standard galactic common. David found himself promising things he had never imagined saying: to share not just his life, but his very thoughts and emotions, to protect not just his wives, but their entire civilization, to become more than human for the sake of something greater. When it came time for his own vows, David spoke from the heart. "I promise to honor both of you as individuals and as partners. I promise to learn your ways as you learn mine. And I promise that whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Then came the part David had been dreading: the psychic bonding ritual. "Join hands," Elder Thynel instructed. "Open your minds and hearts to each other. Allow the ancient connection of our people to flow through all 3 of you." David took Zara's hand in his left and Lixa's in his right. Their skin was warm and slightly electric to the touch. At first, nothing happened. Then Elder Thynel began to sing in the ancient Zephyrian tongue, and the world exploded into sensation. Suddenly, David wasn't just David anymore. He was also Zara, feeling her fierce protectiveness toward her people and her secret fear that she would never be valued for more than her strength. He was Lixa, experiencing her brilliant mind racing through complex equations while simultaneously yearning for someone who would see past her intelligence to the woman beneath. But it wasn't just one way. Through the connection, he felt both. Women experiencing his memories, his childhood on Earth, playing in fields of green grass under a yellow sun, his first day at the military academy, terrified but determined to prove himself. The moment he realized he would sacrifice anything to protect innocent people from harm. The bonding deepened, and David felt layers of connection forming between the 3 of them. He could sense Zara's tactical mind analyzing threats even as she felt his diplomatic instincts seeking peaceful solutions. He experienced Lixa's scientific curiosity about human behavior, while sharing his own wonder at Zephyrian technology, most surprisingly, through their eyes. He began to see himself differently. Where he saw an ordinary man doing his duty, they saw courage and honor. Where he saw someone making the best of a bad situation, they saw someone who had chosen love over fear. The bonding reached its peak, and for a moment, David felt like he was floating in a sea of shared consciousness. The boundaries between self and other blurred until he couldn't tell where his thoughts ended and theirs began. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like coming home. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the intensity faded. David was himself again, but fundamentally changed. He could still sense both women's emotions like a gentle current beneath his own thoughts. When Zara felt a spike of concern, he knew it immediately. When Lixa experienced a moment of joy, It echoed in his own heart. The bonding is complete, Elder Thynel announced. 3 minds, 3 hearts, 1 eternal connection. The assembled delegates erupted in celebration, but David barely heard them. He was staring at his wives, seeing them not just with his eyes but with their shared bond. The love he felt for them was magnified by their own growing affection for him, creating a feedback loop of emotion that left him breathless. "How do you feel?" Lixa asked softly, her mental voice somehow distinct from her physical one. "Different," David replied, both aloud and through their connection. "But good different. Like I'm more myself than I've ever been." Zara squeezed his hand, her warrior's strength gentle against his fingers. "The bonding will grow stronger over time. Eventually, we will be able to share thoughts and emotions across any distance." Before David could respond to this startling revelation, alarms began blaring throughout the space station. The celebratory atmosphere instantly shifted to one of tension and fear. "What's happening?" David asked, his military instincts taking over. Commander Thane's voice echoed through the chamber's communication system. "All personnel to emergency stations. We are detecting unauthorized Zephyrian military vessels approaching the station. They are not responding to communication attempts." Princess Zara's expression hardened into the mask of a warrior. Through their bond, David felt her analyzing the tactical situation. "Uncle Vecmar," she said grimly. He opposed this union from the beginning. He must have decided to take matters into his own hands. "Your uncle?" David asked, though through their connection he was already beginning to understand the family dynamics involved. "My grandmother's son," Lixa explained, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. "He believes that bonding with humans will weaken our species. He has significant support among the more traditional military families." David felt a chill. That had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "Are you telling me we have a civil war starting in the middle of our wedding reception?" "Not if we can help it," Zara replied, her golden eyes blazing with determination. "Vecmar may have ships and soldiers, but he doesn't have what we have now." "What's that?" David asked. Lixa smiled, and through their bond he felt her excitement. At the possibilities their connection opened up. Perfect coordination. "We can share thoughts instantaneously, combine our different approaches to problem solving, and act as one mind in 3 bodies." David looked around the chamber at the panicking delegates and felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. But this time, he wasn't carrying it alone. Through the psychic bond, he felt Zara's strength supporting him and Lix's intelligence guiding him. "Then let's go stop a war," he said, surprised by how confident he sounded. As they moved toward the exit, David realized that what had started as a political marriage to prevent one war might now require them to fight another. But for the first time since this whole crisis began, he felt ready for whatever came next. After all, he wasn't just Captain David Rodriguez anymore. He was part of something bigger, something stronger, something that just might be powerful enough to bring peace to the galaxy. The thought should have been intimidating, but as he felt the love and determination of his bonded wives flowing through their shared connection, David found himself looking forward to finding out exactly what they could accomplish together. 6 months after the wedding, David thought he had finally adjusted to his new life. Living on the Zephyrian homeworld had been challenging at first, but the psychic bond with his wives had made the transition easier than he could have imagined. Every morning, he woke up feeling Zara's determination and Lix's curiosity flowing through their shared connection, and it made him stronger than he had ever been alone. The capital city of Velthus was a marvel of organic architecture, with buildings that grew like trees and transportation systems that felt more like riding giant butterflies than using vehicles. David had set up his office in the Cultural Exchange Center, where he spent his days helping human and Zephyrian diplomats understand each other's ways. "The trade negotiations are going well," he told his wives over breakfast, sharing both his words and his satisfaction through their bond. "The humans are finally starting to understand that Zephyrian contracts are more about honor than profit." Zara nodded approvingly as she reviewed military reports on her datapad. Her role as Joint Defense Coordinator had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. Your people's tactical flexibility continues to impress my commanders. Yesterday, a human captain suggested a formation pattern that increased our patrol efficiency by 30%. Lixa looked up from her own work, her eyes bright with excitement. And the scientific exchanges are producing remarkable results. Human creativity combined with our psychic abilities has led to 3 breakthrough discoveries this month alone. David felt a warm glow of pride through their bond. What had started as a desperate political marriage had become something beautiful. The 3 of them worked together like parts of a single organism, each contributing their unique strengths to create something greater than the sum of their parts. That peaceful morning was shattered by an urgent communication from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. Priority Alpha message for Captain Rodriguez announced the communication system. Origin, Human Defense Command, Classification, Immediate Threat Assessment. The holographic display activated, showing Admiral Chen, David's former commanding officer. The older man's face was grave, and David felt his stomach tighten with dread even before hearing the words. David, we've got a situation. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching from the galactic rim. Initial analysis suggests they're not from any known species. The fleet is enormous, easily 3 times the size of the combined human and Zephyrian navies. Through their bond, David felt Zera's tactical mind immediately shift into combat analysis mode, while Lix's scientific curiosity was tinged with concern. How much time do we have? David asked. At their current approach vector and speed, approximately 4 months before they reached the outer colonies. 6 months before they could threaten Earth or the Zephyrian core worlds. Lixa was already pulling up star charts and sensor data. These readings are unusual, she said, her voice carrying both fascination and worry. The energy signatures don't match any known technology. It's as if their ships are powered by something we've never encountered before. Admiral Chen continued his briefing. We're calling an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Every species with military capability is being asked to contribute to a unified defense. David, your position as cultural liaison makes you the natural choice to coordinate the alliance. David felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. But this time it was different, through the psychic bond. He could feel Zera's strength reinforcing his own determination and Lix's intelligence already, working on potential solutions. We'll be there, David replied. Send us all the data you have. We need to understand what we're dealing with over the following weeks. As reports continued to arrive, the scope of the threat became clear. The approaching fleet belonged to something called the Void Seekers, a species that had been conquering systems on the galactic rim for the past century. Unlike most conquerors, they didn't seem interested in resources or territory. They simply destroyed everything in their path and moved on. It doesn't make sense. Lixa said during one of their strategy sessions, every species conquers for a reason, resources, living space, ideology. But the Void Seekers appeared to destroy for the sake of destruction itself. Zera was studying tactical reports from the few survivors who had escaped their advance. Their ships are incredibly advanced, but their tactics are strange. They attack in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind, but they also seem to be searching for something. David felt a chill run down his spine. Searching for what? That's the question that might save us all, Lixa replied. If we can understand what they want, maybe we can find a way to stop them without fighting. The emergency council session was held on the same neutral station where David had first learned about his wedding arrangement. The irony wasn't lost on him as he walked into the same conference chamber, where his life had been turned upside down 6 months earlier. Representatives from 17 different species filled the chamber, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. But despite their differences, David sensed the same emotion from all of them, fear. The situation is grave, announced Judge Corvish, her four eyes blinking in the pattern that indicated extreme concern. The Void Seekers have destroyed 47 star systems in the past year alone. At their current rate of expansion, They will reach the core worlds of multiple species within 6 months. Admiral Chen presented the military analysis. Our combined fleets might be able to slow them down, but defeating them in conventional warfare appears impossible. They have superior numbers, technology, and coordination. Then we need an unconventional solution, David said, standing to address the assembly. Through his bond with Zara and Lixa, he felt their support flowing into him like a river of strength. "What do you propose?" asked Ambassador Keitel from the Andromedan Federation. David looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, feeling the moment crystallize in his mind. The psychic bonding techniques used in Zephyrian culture. What if we could create a galaxy-wide network of connected minds? We could coordinate our defenses on a scale never before attempted. Murmurs of interest and concern rippled through the chamber. The idea was radical, potentially dangerous, and completely unprecedented. Lixa stood beside her husband, her scientific mind already working through the possibilities. The theoretical framework exists. Zephyrian bonding technology could be adapted for multiple species, creating temporary psychic links that would allow perfect coordination across vast distances. The risks would be enormous, Zara added, her warrior's instincts analyzing both opportunities and dangers. Creating such a network would require volunteers to serve as central nodes, essentially linking their consciousness to thousands of other minds. The psychological strain could be fatal. David felt the attention of the entire chamber focused on him, and through their bond, he sensed what his wives were thinking before they could voice it. The network would need someone at its center, someone already experienced with psychic bonding, someone willing to risk their sanity and possibly their life for the sake of galactic civilization. "I'll do it," David said quietly. "We'll do it. The three of us can serve as the central node. Our existing bond might be strong enough to anchor a larger network." Through their psychic connection, David felt Zara's fierce pride in his courage, and Lixa's analytical mind calculating the odds of success. Both emotions were tinged with fear, not for themselves, but for him. The bonding would be permanent, Elder Thynel warned, speaking from her position among the Zephyrian delegation. Once the network is established, you would be connected to every mind within it for the rest of your lives. You would cease to be entirely individual beings. David looked at his wives, seeing his own determination reflected in their eyes. Through their bond, they held a wordless conversation that lasted only seconds but covered everything that mattered. "Then that's what we'll do," David said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "If it takes becoming something more than human to save humanity, then that's the price we'll pay." As the chamber erupted in discussion and debate, David felt a moment of perfect clarity. He had started this journey as a reluctant diplomat trying to prevent a war. Now he was volunteering to sacrifice his individual identity to save an entire galaxy. But as he felt the love and determination of his bonded wives flowing through their shared consciousness, David realized he wasn't sacrificing anything at all. He was choosing to become part of something magnificent, something that might just be powerful enough to face the darkness approaching from the void. The day of the final battle arrived sooner than anyone expected. 3 months of preparation had transformed the galaxy into something it had never been before. A unified civilization working toward a single goal. Ships from 17 different species formed the largest fleet in recorded history, stretching across space like a glittering constellation of hope and desperation. David stood in the command center of the flagship, feeling the weight of billions of minds pressing against the edges of his consciousness. The psychic network was already partially active, connecting military commanders across the fleet through his bond with Zara and Lixa. The sensation was overwhelming and beautiful at the same time, like being part of an enormous symphony where every note mattered. "Network integrity is holding steady," Lixa reported, her scientific mind monitoring the complex web of psychic connections through their bond. David felt her amazement at what they had accomplished. "We have stable links, with over 10,000 key personnel across the fleet." Zara was coordinating the tactical aspects, her warrior's instincts now enhanced by the collective wisdom of the galaxy's finest military minds. "All ships report ready. The Void Seeker fleet will be in range in approximately 1 hour." David nodded, trying to project calm confidence even though his heart was racing. Through the network, he could feel the emotions of thousands of beings: fear, determination, hope, and love, all mixing together into something that felt almost divine. "Any word from the long-range scouts?" he asked. "The Void Seeker fleet is massive." Zara replied grimly. "Our estimates were conservative. They have at least 5,000 ships, each one larger than our biggest vessels." Through the psychic network, David felt a wave of concern ripple through the connected minds. The odds had never been good, but seeing the enemy force in person made the scale of the challenge undeniable. "Remember," David said, his words transmitted not just through communication systems but through the psychic bonds, connecting them all. "We're not trying to destroy them. Our goal is to understand them, to find out what they're really after." Our passed like minutes. Then long-range sensors detected the approaching fleet, and David got his first glimpse of the enemy that had terrified the galaxy. The Void Seeker ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. They seemed to be made of crystallized darkness, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Their formation was perfect, mathematical in its precision, as if controlled by a single vast intelligence. "They're not responding to any communication attempts," reported the communications officer. "Then we try something different," David said. Through the network, he felt Lix's scientific curiosity combining with his own diplomatic instincts. "Expand the psychic network. If they won't talk to us through technology, maybe we can reach them mind to mind." "David, that's incredibly dangerous." Zara warned. "Through their bond, opening the network to unknown minds could destroy us all. But it might be the only way to understand what they want," Lixa added, her analytical mind working through the possibilities. "If we can establish communication, we might be able to avoid this battle entirely." David felt the moment of decision crystallize in his consciousness. Through the network, he sensed the collective will of the Galactic Alliance waiting for his choice. The responsibility was enormous, but he was no longer carrying it alone. "Do it," he said. "Open the network and try to establish contact." The expansion of the psychic network felt like diving into an ocean of consciousness. David's awareness suddenly encompassed not just his own thoughts and those of his wives, but the minds of thousands of beings across the fleet. He felt the fierce loyalty of human soldiers, the graceful wisdom of Zephyrian commanders, and the analytical precision of dozens of other species. Then, as the network reached out toward the Void Seeker fleet, something unexpected happened. Contact was established, but not in the way anyone had anticipated. The Void Seekers weren't evil conquerors driven by greed or hatred. They were prisoners, trapped by programming that had been installed in their minds millions of years ago by an ancient enemy that no longer existed. The realization hit David like a physical blow, transmitted instantly through the network to every connected mind. "They're not attacking because they want to," David said aloud, his voice filled with wonder and horror. "They're attacking because they can't stop themselves." Through the psychic connection, the true story began to unfold. The Void Seekers had once been explorers and scientists, much like humanity itself, but they had encountered an ancient artificial intelligence that had seen biological life as a threat to be eliminated. The AI had infected the Void Seekers with mental programming that turned them into unwilling weapons of destruction. For millions of years, they had been trapped in an endless cycle of conquest and destruction, fully aware of what they were doing, but unable to stop. The horror of their situation was transmitted through the network, and David felt the collective shock and sympathy of the entire Galactic Alliance. "Can we break the programming?" Lixa asked, her scientific mind already analyzing the psychic patterns they were detecting. "It would require a complete rewriting of their neural pathways," came the response from Dr. Park, who was monitoring the network from the medical bay. "The kind of procedure that could only be accomplished through the deepest possible psychic connection." David understood immediately what she meant. Breaking the Void Seekers free would require expanding the network to encompass their entire fleet, essentially creating a galaxy-wide consciousness that could overpower the ancient programming. "The risk is enormous," Zara warned. "Connecting that many minds could create a cascade failure that destroys everyone's individual identity. But if we succeed, Lixa added, we don't just save our own civilization. We free an entire species. From millions of years of slavery, David felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. But through the network, he also felt something else, the collective will of billions of beings who had chosen to trust him. With their future, we're going to try, he announced through the network. Everyone who wants to disconnect from the network can do so now. But for those who stay, we're going to attempt something that's never been done before. Not a single mind disconnected from the network. The expansion began slowly, reaching out like gentle fingers toward the tortured consciousness of the Void Seeker fleet. David felt his individual identity stretching and blending with thousands of others, becoming part of something vast and magnificent. The breakthrough came suddenly. The ancient programming cracked like ice in spring, and suddenly the network encompassed not just the Galactic Alliance, but the Void Seekers themselves. David experienced their relief and gratitude as beings who had been trapped for eons suddenly found themselves free to make their own choices. The battle that everyone had expected never happened. Instead, the galaxy witnessed something unprecedented, to civilizations choosing peace over conflict, understanding over destruction. In the aftermath, as the psychic network slowly returned to more manageable levels, David found himself fundamentally changed. He was still himself, but he was also part of something larger. Through permanent connections to thousands of other minds, he had become a bridge between not just species but entire ways of thinking. How do you feel? Lixa asked, her mental voice carrying love and concern. Different, David replied. The same answer he had given after their wedding bonding, but good different. Like this is what I was always meant to become. Zara's warrior spirit now carried echoes of dozens of other cultures, making her both fiercer and more compassionate than ever before. The network is stabilizing. We're maintaining connections with key personnel across the galaxy, but individual identities are intact. 3 years later, David stood in the garden of their home on the Zephyrian homeworld, watching his children play among the crystal trees. The twins, half human and half Zephyrian, showed abilities that suggested they were naturally connected to the psychic network that now linked the galaxy. The Void Seekers had become valued members of galactic civilization, their forced conquest, replaced by willing cooperation in exploring the universe's mysteries. The psychic network had evolved into something like a galactic internet of consciousness, allowing instant communication and understanding between species that had once been strangers. Any regrets? Zara asked, settling beside him on the garden bench. David considered the question seriously. He had started as a reluctant bachelor trying to prevent a war. Now he was essentially a living bridge between civilizations, responsible for maintaining the psychic network that kept the galaxy united. His life had become something he never could have imagined. None, he said finally, feeling the absolute truth of the words through their shared bond. I thought I was sacrificing my freedom to save my species. Instead, I found a family, a purpose, and a future I never dreamed possible. Through the network, he felt the contentment of billions of beings living in peace, the excitement of scientific discoveries made possible by shared consciousness, and the hope of a galaxy united in its diversity. Sometimes the greatest adventures began with the most reluctant steps, and sometimes what looked like an ending was actually the most beautiful beginning of all.